Well, good evening, everybody.
Good
How's everybody
evening.
doing tonight?
Doing well, I hope you are.
Oh, just excited to be here today. Been looking forward to this all day long. Um, let's see. Let me look at something right quick and we'll get started. Let's see. Uh, yeah, all right, I'm ready to go. Again, prayers for our classmate, Faith. Her daughter's having issues. Um, and so, I told her, God, family, work, school. That's the priorities in that order. So family takes place over school, coming to class. When you got things like that, take care of your children, take care of your parents. Uh, that's the most important thing. All right, so let's start with stars of the week. Our stars of the week are Courtney. She has completed her OMA. She's about ready to put it in task stream. So that's a reminder to all of us to be working on our OMA. I really like Tamika's discussion board 4 and 5. And Tamika, you can unmute yourself. Let's talk about about your post. Tamika gave us a good example of retribution rather than restorative. So she talked about watching a discipline incident.
Oh yeah. It was not good.
Yeah, I mean, our first case study was about a teacher that really didn't care for the kid. And we that's not an anomaly. There are people that work in our business that we as administrators have to protect those kids. But what happens when administrators are the ones that take a run at a kid?
Yeah.
And you're gonna work with people like that, you
It
know.
it was not good. This child has had this has been an ongoing thing since she came to school on August 21st. She has been last week she was suspended for 3 days. She left early yesterday, she left early Monday, but that day that she, had her aggressive behavior and all of that, I think she went home that day. No, she was suspended. She went home that day and then she came back and they put her in ISS. And she just didn't understand why. This is a kindergarten child. She went home the day before and then she comes back the next day and you put her in ISS. She doesn't know why she's there. She already got the consequence the previous day, and then y'all throw her ISS the next day.
That's what I mean. That looks to me like double jeopardy. I mean,
Yeah, it was.
that's too much. Now, you probably can't see it. I've gotten so old, it's hard to see on my right here in the web of my between my finger and thumb. A kid bit me right there one time, and I was principal, had an elementary. But you got to go on about your business. I mean, now I'm gonna tell you what: when you get bit by a little kid, it's worse than a dog bite. It gets infected. It's awful. But that's part of the job, folks. I get that she bit somebody and now they're mad, but that's what kids do. They bite. And that's like getting mad at a pig that stinks. You know that when you got the pig? If you have the littles, they'll bite you every now and then. That's kind of the way it goes, or they'll scratch you.
The teacher has done a really good job of trying to, the next day start fresh. But everybody can't do that.
There you go. Everybody can't do that. It's personal. It's not professional. And that's the reason why we don't do restorative practice. It's not because they're hard or we don't know. It's because we don't want to. We want that retribution. When you're a principal, and especially when you've got assistant principals that are handling discipline, you need to be paying attention to what they're doing. I had six and two deans when I was high school principal, so I had eight processing discipline, and I put them all in the same place where I could watch them, could see what was going on. Because I don't want to be in court every week over some foolishness that they've gotten us into because they were mad. That deal. And so another thing that I wanted to bring up, and thank you, Tamika, is this absence before conference, telling the kid they can't come back until they bring a parent. That's illegal. Let me make sure. I don't care what you call it. That's illegal. You'll lose that one in court. And the second one is this notion of therapeutic suspension, where you call the parent to come get them for the rest of the day. That's illegal too. And it's not close. This is not a gray area. If that kid's not in school, then there better be paperwork where you have suspended them out of school. There is no such thing as ABC or therapeutic or whatever you want to call it. If that kid's not in your building, there better be documentation. There better be a reason why.
I don't think
That's
everybody.
sending them home, telling their parents to come pick them up and all that. No, 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 no. That's got to go in power school, and suspension forms got to be generated. And if it doesn't get to power school, the official suspension form is only generated in, well, not what is now Infinite Campus, but on the third screen. You can put it in the first two screens, but until you complete the third and push the button, it won't generate the suspension form. And so a lot of people do that.
I was getting ready to say that but coming from Smith, I've saw that probably more than suspensions. If they, hey, stopped them or did something and they say, hey, go home, cool off for the rest of the day. And then, okay. So that's interesting to know.
What if that kid gets abducted? What if something happens? What if that kid goes out and commits a crime, something or another? And so what they do is they put them in just in case something bad happens, so they can push the button and act like that they did the suspension. But they don't do it so that they don't have to count it as a suspension, and they'll take it out. That's that game playing. That'll lose you your job, and more than that, you'll get sued in court and lose. That's that game playing with that disciplinary data reporting. ABC is illegal, and so is therapeutic suspension. Courtney's joined us, our star of the week on the OMA. Courtney, what do you want to add to this discussion?
I just wanted to add that, we went through something very similar last year, and the parent was all for it until she got pissed off with us about something else. And
Yes.
she got a lawyer, and we had
Yes.
to reimburse her gas and everything for picking up her child where we didn't have a suspension in place. That's illegal. And she sued us for gas and everything. We had to do all that.
Oh, yeah.
So
Yeah.
yeah.
Now, you don't have to cover that. Thank you, Courtney. You don't have to cover that if you suspended them. But if you didn't, when a lawyer and again, it's all fun and games. And then when the parent gets mad at you,
yeah,
because then all of a sudden, they're the one that wears you out.
Yeah, because our assistant principal was like, he's done it this way for years, and blah blah blah.
Yeah.
And yeah, we got in trouble.
Yeah, that don't matter in court. You can't go to court and plead stupidity. We've done it this way for years and didn't know any better. That's the same as pleading stupidity. That won't help you in court, by the way. They'll wear your tail out. They will wear your tail out in court if you go in, knowing that those are the two things that they're looking for when you go in. They know that people have been pulling that shenanigan for years, but yeah, you can do it for 100 years, but when you get caught, you can't claim, well, I did it because we've always done it, so I should be indemnified. No, it's always been illegal. You were not supposed to do that. Again, that suspension is the official notice of the charge against you. So let's look at that right quick. Let's remind ourselves what is due process. And so I have summarized it for you. And again, it was reaffirmed in 75, but it goes back to, in the Goss case, but it goes back to Tinker versus Des Moines in 69. And this is what kids get, whether you want to or not, or whether you've done it forever or not. Process must be announced in the disciplinary data manuals and district code of conduct. Right to be informed of the charges. Right to hear evidence, witnesses, informed of the charges. That's the official. If you're going to suspend a kid, that means you got to give them the official suspension notice. And that can only be generated from the third screen. And when it actually goes into the state system, it won't, you can't just put in a partial. It has to be completely put in and logged and registered before a suspension form will be generated. Right to respond to charges and give their side of the story. Right to bear witness, not to be treated arbitrarily or capriciously. That's the substance of due process. Now, procedural is, did you follow these steps? And if you did not do the suspension form, then you have not given them due process. But most specifically, it's illegal on a couple of other fronts. But right here, so we go back to the district code of conduct, and that's where we're going to pick up. We went through the manual, the disciplinary data manual. We know all the laws and rules now. Now we have to apply them without being arbitrary or capricious. Without being arbitrary or capricious. Arbitrary means we punish one and not the other, or we punish one way too much. How do we assure that? We simply go to our handy dandy code of conduct that is approved by the school board, that translates what the state said in that disciplinary manual, all those things that you can't do in school, and it tells you what you can't do and how it has to be reported. Now you just have to assign a consequence. This is Charlotte Mecklenburg's. They use a tier system, and they have theirs separated into elementary and secondary. But right here, they start with all those things that are in that manual right here. They do the level one. They do the level 1, 2, 3, and they start with the things that the state says you can't do, and they give you your level or your tier responses, what you can do. You know, the minimum is a level 1 response for this. The maximum is that. You can't give them, and then remember, you can't give the maximum on the first offense. And so that's what those are for. And it goes through all the things that this is adopted by your board. If you step outside of this, then that would be capricious. You gave more punishment than the policy of your district, the law allows. So one of the famous cases that I had to go out and hear in Charlotte Mecklenburg was a kid brought two big knives to Providence High School, and I knew this one was going to get ugly, so I went out and did it myself. And I acted as my own attorney. He brought his, and the district had their attorney, and I go out and I do the hearing. And I advised him anything he say could, you know, can and will be used in court of law, because I mean he was arrested. He had a trial date. He was 18 years old. So his parents didn't come, but they sent the attorney. And the attorney let him plead guilty, tell the story. Yeah, he brought the knives. He's going to hurt somebody with them and all that. But at the end, what the attorney said is, the punishment was capricious. The case needs to be thrown out. The handbook says that he can only be given 5 days of suspension. And that's when I pointed out to his attorney, you got the wrong handbook. That's the elementary handbook. This is high school. It's 10 days what he was given. Then he wanted to strike his client's testimony from the record. No, we can't do that. But see, people are watching this stuff, is my point. Oh, by the way, that attorney, he was just some young guy, one of those, law firms in Charlotte, you have to do pro bono work. And he looked just like Booger from Revenge of the Nerds. He was just out of law school, was 25 years old, and he thought he was Clarence Darrow. He thought that he'd already found a technicality. He's going to get his client off. And he had the elementary handbook at Providence High School trying to say that we'd given him too much, or they had given him too much punishment. But so it's what I'm talking about. People will monitor that stuff. Sometimes you'll get sued because you went the maximum on the first offense. Well, that could be construed as capricious, giving too much punishment. That's why they have a minimum and a maximum. Unless there are extenuating circumstances, you're to stay at the minimum on the first offense. Now, after that, you can go up. Again, you got to know this stuff. There's levels or tiers of punishments. And what's in that tier? Now, sometimes they give you choices. Let's look at that. You get choices within that tier. And you got to be careful with those choices just because it's in that level or tier. See, level 1 right here. This would be level 1. The most you can do in a level 1 is in-school suspension. That's the maximum. You don't pick that one generally unless there's something heinous that went on. There's others here. You got to be careful. You got to monitor yourself. You need to run that report monthly to see, look at look at the instance you had and look at the consequences you gave to make sure that you're being consistent. That's what, everybody, when they talk to assistant principals, hopefully they all say, just like Raquel, I mean, when he's talking about, I want to be consistent, or she, I want to be consistent. That's what we're talking about. You got to be consistent. You got to make sure you hit the right level for the infraction, but that you don't go all the way to the top the first time, even within the level, unless there's extenuating circumstances. That's the standard of arbitrary and capricious. All right. So we've got that now. We understand that piece. And we know what due process they're supposed to get is. Close that one. All right. Before we get to that kind of concludes last week and our DBs, our discussion board. So let's look at our weekly schedule now. I'm right on time. Um, this week we are looking at technology, cyberbullying, bullying, those kinds of things. We're also going to talk about antecedent to behaviors. And that's why stopping bullying and cyberbullying is so important. Antecedent behaviors are the little things that precede but lead to the big things. Bullying in itself is bad, but the problem with bullying, it leads to fights, it leads to weapons. The last two shootings in Charlotte Meck where kids were killed, there was bullying, and the kid finally got enough and brought a gun and shot and killed the bully. That's what we're talking about. The little things, if left unchecked, will become these big acts of violence. That's the law of antecedent behaviors. We're going to talk about that. That's why bullying is key. It's one of those key. It's one of the big four. And so remember, next week is case study. Um, and I've already gone over that with you. So I want to move on from that and start talking about. I want to start with the notion of antecedent behaviors. Now, one of the things that I'm going to talk about in a minute is about cyberbullying, but I want to put it in context. Cyberbullying is against the law. It's a legal thing. Now, there are people who argue that if it didn't happen at school or if it didn't happen on a school computer, that they don't have to deal with it. That is wrong. That's a lie. Again, we've done it forever that way, but when you go to court, you're going to lose your house over that one. The law is very clear. Cyberbullying law is very clear in terms of what you must do. If it disrupts the educational environment, if kids are beefing about it, or it's a problem at school, or somebody comes and reports it, you legally have to deal with it. This notion that I don't have to deal with it, yes, you do. Or I don't know if they used the school, it doesn't matter what machine they used or where they were. If it comes to your doorstep, you must deal with it. That is the law. I don't care what anybody tells you. Even sometimes districts will try to hold that party line. We don't have to deal with that. Yes, you do. Wait till you go to court and you'll find out. So I'll show you the cyberbullying law in a few minutes, but I just wanted to make sure that, as we went through this. Now, identification and prevention of antecedent behaviors to prevent these violent acts on school campuses. Now, the notion here is the little things, if left unchecked, will become the big things. People say, well, how can you stop a shooting? Well, you stop the bullying that preceded the shooting. That's how you stop the shooting. That's what you've got to understand. This notion of we don't deal with the little things, or we declassify them, or we put them in educator's notebook and hide them. Yeah, see how that works out for you. Those things accumulate, and all of a sudden, bad things start happening in your building. Too much display of affection, inappropriate display of affection. Next thing you know, you start having sexual offenses, sexual assaults on your campus. Kids get out of control, especially middle school boys. They're dumb. They're dumb as a cake of soap. I was one. I know. and you've got to stop it at a level that you can deal with it before it will overtake your campus. And so now here are the things that really are the key. Cyberbullying, bullying being first among them that are going to lead to these things. Sexual harassment, sexting, the stuff on the phone, and then gang activity. These are the four areas that will lead to these violent offenses. If you don't stop them at an early enough level, these are the things that will get you right here on this screen. Now, I collected data for a number of years in the largest school district in the state, and this is what the data told me. This was the keynote conference presentation of DPI in 2011, 14 years ago. That's how smart I am. I knew this stuff 14 years ago, before people even knew what some of this stuff was, because that's what the data told me. I hired a criminologist, and we studied the data patterns for years. I hired Ryan Ryder, the criminologist. He wasn't a school person, trying to figure out why we were having all these violent offenses. And this is what we found out. This right here is what we found out. And so this is a long, but it develops all your federal guidelines. It has all your laws in it. It tells you about persistently dangerous schools. These are the things that happen. It helps you identify violence prevention and education. It gives you the theoretical background, risk factors of why we're this way, gang awareness, all the stuff, the types of them. It goes through all this stuff. I'm not I don't like just sitting doing, but because this one's mine. But this is seminal work in antecedent work and behavior. Not because I did it, it's recognized as being seminal work, um, which means it's important. You need to understand this stuff. And so the one that we spend the most time on now, I'm not going to spend time on gangs or of some, what we really spend our time on now, because it is the most prevalent of the four that I just identified, is cyberbullying, cyberbullying, harassment, discrimination. This is the area that you've really got to focus on in schools. And so this is the presentation that we did a couple of summers ago. Dr. Maraglia, Dr. Sane, Dr. Griffin Jordan collaboratively put together this for us for our classes. Schools can be sued for failure to stop harassment. Disciplinary data, tells us that we have to stop this. Cyberbullying, electronic, anytime you're using to do that. So right here is the cyberbullying law. All right. And it's very, if any of these things are happening, if it's disrupting the educational environment, you have to deal with it. And so here is a full definition of what's against the law right here. And it doesn't have to happen on your campus. It doesn't have to happen with the school system machine. None of that stuff is relevant. If it disrupts the educational environment, you must deal with it. And again, we go through that and we look at all the ones that didn't get handled and all the bad stuff that happened to them. You can watch those if they'll still come up. But the bottom line here is, um, if you let any of these things happen on your campus, and let me go back to this law right here. I don't think I can make that any bigger. A person who uses a computer or computer network to do any of the following: intent to intimidate or torment a minor, build a fake profile, pose as a minor, internet chat room, use an email, instant message, follow them online, inappropriate comments, discourage others to post private, personal, sexual information, intimidate, putting doctored images, um, use a computer system for repeated or sustained electronic communication, email transmissions, messaging, DMs, any of that stuff. Um, Unauthorized data, sign a minor up for inappropriate sites, um, any of this kind of stuff, intimidate, torment, build a fake profile, send messages, send pictures, make erroneous statements, true or false, intended to provoke, harm them, copy or disseminate unauthorized data, uh, bullying or cyberbullying employees. All this stuff has to be dealt with. None of this has anything to do with the machine used or where they were when they sent the text. That doesn't matter. And so going back, um, going back to last week again, in that disciplinary data manual under bullying and cyberbullying, it says very, very clearly, if it disrupts the educational environment of your school, you have to deal with it. So when you have somebody, an administrator at your building telling you, we don't know where that happened, we don't have to deal with it, they're at least lying to themselves. They're probably lying to you. Hopefully they know the law and know that, but again, ignorance of the law is no excuse. That's the one that's going to get you when you don't deal with these things. You have a duty to respond and you didn't. That would be nonfeasance. You had a duty to respond and you didn't. And that's when you get sued. That's when you get sued. These kids kill themselves. And then their parents sue the school and they win. Got history of bullying, nothing was done. You know, the girl in New Jersey, the school claimed, well, it didn't happen at school. What's that got to do with the price of eggs? You knew that these kids were doing this to this girl, and y'all just let it go. Y'all just claimed that since it didn't happen at school, y'all didn't have, but that's not what the law says. So you must deal with you must know what it is. And we've got plenty of materials under last week and this week, especially that defines this for you. Now, you know you've got to have a bullying initiative, an anti-bullying initiative at your school. That's also in that handbook. That's a requirement that you must have something at your school. Now, years ago when I had to supervise schools, when schools would get themselves in trouble, they either had too many reportable offenses, persistently dangerous offenses, or had too many suspensions. Now, again, if you're too high, you're persistently dangerous. You've got to write an addendum safety plan, an addendum part section to your school improvement plan. Let me be clear on this. Every year you have to produce a school improvement plan. The first five evidences in this program mirror those sections that you have to do. And then when you put your sixth evidence, the SOP with them, that's the actual plan. You have to do this yearly. You have to look at your tests. You have to look at your teachers. Um, um, okay, it says mine's going to end in 10 minutes. I guess I'm back to a non-paid account. They ended our accounts this week, but we'll figure that part out. And so the issue becomes if you let me think how I want to put this. Give me just 1 second here. I'm old. I have to think sometimes. If you didn't um, if you didn't follow the law and you did what you wanted to do in these cases, then that would be easy to see. The problem is you did something you claimed would fit the problem, but has nothing to do with it. You get in trouble for that too. That's called misfeasance. You did the wrong thing, not intentionally, but you did the wrong thing. So what I'm talking about is when I would have schools that got in trouble on their suspensions or acts of violence, they would say something like, "Well, my plan is to have students wear a uniform." That's just kids dressed similarly behaving badly. I mean, what's that got? That's not a plan. And so if you went to court and something bad happened at your building and say, "Well, this was my plan," they'd say, "Well, that's not an appropriate plan. That's misfeasance. You didn't intentionally do the wrong thing, but that won't fix your problem." And so one of the things we have to be very careful about is when we get ourselves, in a bad situation where we've got to write a plan, a safety plan for our building, it can't just be something dumb like wear a uniform or something that that we know is not going to work or theoretically is of no value. You say, "Well, I did something, I'll be okay when I go to court." No, that's not what the law says. Misfeasance, malfeasance, nonfeasance. You had a duty to act, you didn't. Misfeasance is when you done something, it wasn't the right thing, but you say, "Well, I did something," but if it wasn't the right thing, you're still on the hook when you go to court. That's the thing that's the thing that emerging administrators don't understand is that we've got a problem and we can't just come up with a fake solution like wearing uniforms or something that we know is not going to call that the literature or experience tells us is not going to work. That won't fly when you go to court is my point. It won't fly when you go to court. I did something. Well, it wasn't the right thing. That you did something is of no value when you go to court if it wasn't the right thing. Or this notion, well, I didn't have to act because it didn't happen at school. That's not what the law says. If your environment was disrupted, if somebody came and made a report to you, you were to handle it. Everybody knows if you intentionally do the wrong thing, like we started this discussion tonight with Tamika about, that you're going to be liable. But what emerging administrators have to understand is if you do nothing, you can get in trouble. Or if you did the wrong thing, not intentionally, so that you wouldn't be very disruptive, something easy, that neither one of those will help you when you go to court. You've got to understand that you got to do the right thing and you got to do the legal thing every time. And there's got to be a theoretical underpinning or data that says this is the right thing. Something as dumb as uniforms, there was no data that said that uniforms did anything. And we had people that thought that that was a plan. They knew better than that, but it was easy. They wanted something simple and easy rather than getting teachers out of the room and supervising halls and supervising their hotspot and monitoring their data where bad things were happening. They didn't want to have to do that because it'd make teachers mad. Have to go to the lunchroom with their kids. Yeah, that's what you need to do. But they didn't want to do that. Well, you go to court and you didn't do that stuff. You see what happens to you. It'll be bad for you. Dr. Maraglia, it's time for you to chime in as our resident principal. Tell us about this from the boots on the ground perspective.
Well, one thing that I always think about when we get to this unit, and I cannot emphasize this enough, these issues are going to take an inordinate amount of your time. I think about our case studies, and I've had some students say, "Well, that seems kind of old. How is that still relevant?" Every one of our case studies, I deal with those types of things on a regular basis. But cyberbullying, the social media aspect, that is the biggest issue right now and impacts so many areas of school. And the thing that you have to remember, and Dr. Lamb's been saying this, is if it is in any way connected to the school and has an impact on the daily operations, consequences can be levied, should be levied, must be levied. Because you don't know what this could turn into, and you've got to protect your students and your staff. I'm thinking about just so many different instances, students posting photos of guns and having to deal with that, and they weren't at school, they weren't on campus, but they still post a picture. We had a situation where we were having a dance and the kid was at home, posted a picture of a gun. We had to get law enforcement out there. We didn't know what that kid was going to do. We didn't know what kind of access that child had to weapons. You've got to be on top of this and you have got to respond. You've got to investigate. And in your discussion postings, and as we've said, you've learned that discipline takes a ton of your time. Investigations done well take a lot of time. You've got to be on it. You can't just say, well, I've got observations to do. That's not an excuse. And if you tell that to a judge, he's going to say, well, that's great. I understand you had observations to do, but you've still got to take care of your folks.
Yeah.
You've got to respond to these things.
All right, let's call a quick timeout here. In the chat, I have put a new Zoom link. Hopefully it will work. So let's all switch to that link and we'll continue.
Dr. Lamb, if it was not to work, I also have mine pulled up that I could do that as well. So we've got another option if we
Yeah.
need to.
So can you put the link in the chat? Try the first one. If it doesn't work, we'll go to the second one. And you'll probably have to it'll take us out of this one when you click on the first one.
And there's
So
the
copy
second
the
one.
second one when she puts it in as well. I'm gonna copy it. Okay, I'm gonna switch over to the new one here. Let's see if we can.